The movie is set in Mexico, and it opens up with a montage of green elements, like a lady painted in green water flowing down the stairs, and the streets covered in strange green liquid. At this time, Mexico is going through an intense civil unrest where thousands of people are perishing each day. In the next scene, we see a hospital where the staff is rushing to clear all the beds for the seriously injured demonstrators. At the same hospital, an elderly man named Rolando is accompanying his wife, Alicia. She is so ill that she requires an expensive surgery to replace a heart valve. However, the hospital is unwilling to take the risk. At this time, the doctor advises Rolando to seek out another private hospital for his wife, saying their beds are currently overwhelmed. This is a huge problem for the middle-class Orlando, as the surgery will cost him around 100,000 pesos, which is a substantial sum of money. Outside the hospital, the city is going through a deadly turmoil. Guns are being fired incessantly. Helicopters are whizzing dangerously low over the city. Explosions are taking place here and there, and people are being killed as if their lives hold no importance. In order to combat the situation, the state apparatus has deployed military forces. However, instead of maintaining peace, more bullets are fired, and hence the death toll continues to rise. Amidst all the chaos in the city, we are introduced to Ivan, a high-ranking government official. He is currently hosting a lavish post-wedding party at his opulent mansion for his beloved daughter, Marianne. Well-dressed, affluent individuals and business magnates attend the celebration, presenting lavish gifts and cash to the newlyweds. Marianne hands over these gifts to her mother, who stores them safely in a vault. Shortly after, Marianne's mother becomes anxious as the water in the area turns green, indicating the onset of a rebellion. Concerned, she summons her husband, but the green color surprisingly vanishes before he arrives. Ivan then returns to the party after telling her not to worry. However, his wife remains uneasy and instructs the head waitress, Marta, to search for the source of the green igay. Dr. Seuss is hanging out around here somewhere. After a while, a prominent government official named Victor arrives at the party, prompting Ivan to escort his family outside to greet him. Victor informs the family that their land permit has been approved. This indicates that despite the precarious situation in the city, the rich have been getting away with all their lavish needs. Not long after, Victor becomes aware of the growing danger, so he and his family hastily depart from there. In the midst of the ongoing wedding celebration, Rolando makes his presence. It turns out he is the family's gardener. He approaches Marianne's mother humbly and begs for 200,000 pesos for his wife's emergency surgery. The woman returns to the party and asks Ivan and her son Daniel for some cash. She gathers around 35,000 pesos and hands them over to Rolando. However, the money is insufficient. Moments later, he meets Marianne and informs her of his predicament. Being the kind woman that she is, Marianne immediately decides to help him, so she summons Daniel. However, he simply hands him some more money and asks him to leave. Marianne is disappointed by this response and tries to access the safe to retrieve additional funds for Orlando, but discovers that the password has been changed. She then approaches her family members, but no one is willing to assist, causing her to become angry. Left with no other option, she brings her own credit card, but by this time, Rolando has already left. As a solution, she takes her father's driver, Christian, and leaves the wedding party in secret to visit Rolando's residence. A few moments later, they learn that the police have blocked the roads around her mansion in anticipation of the impending attacks. As a result of this, they are forced to take a longer route. While driving, they listen to the radio and learn that protests have taken over the streets, but the authorities have yet to respond. Back at the mansion, the family eventually gets to know that the bride has gone missing, causing them to panic. As they contact the authorities, the head waitress, Marta, calls her son Christian and gets to know that Marianne is with him. She asks her to immediately return to the mansion, but Marianne claims that the guests can wait. Alicia cannot. After a while, the two somehow manage to make their way to Orlando's house. Christian turns out to be the old man's nephew. Upon entering the house, he tries to contact the authorities, but the phone lines are not working. Despite the difficult circumstances, Marianne promises that she will take Alicia to the hospital. On the other hand, the protesters, who are dressed in red and green, break into the mansion. Their leader shoots Ivan, causing full-blown panic. Surprisingly, instead of protecting his employer, the security chief shoots the guests and assists the protesters in ransacking the house. He also takes Marianne's mother hostage and forces her to open the safe. Once she does, he finishes her off cold-heartedly. Meanwhile, the workers ransack the mansion, stealing all of its belongings and valuables. The only one who stays loyal to her owners is Martha. She hides in a closet and discreetly calls her son to warn him not to return. Unfortunately, one of the protesters spots her and knocks her down. The demonstrators then destroy whatever is left in the house, and in the process, even Daniel's pregnant wife is killed. It appears that the wealthy are facing retribution for their greed and conceit. The color green is a real bitch. Later that night, Marta regains consciousness and discovers that the mansion has been completely destroyed. She hurries back home while the chaos continues. The following morning, Ivan is loaded into an ambulance and taken to the hospital. Now the situation at the mansion finally appears to be under control elsewhere. Marianne decides to return home, so Christian steps outside to check on the situation. During this time, he is suddenly confronted by several military soldiers who offer to accompany Marianne home. They trust the soldiers, and Marianne boards their truck. Unfortunately, the soldiers turn out to be rude and demand that Marianne give up her phone, jewelry, and watch. We see that the city has devolved into shambles with dead bodies strewn about. Instead of returning Marianne home, the soldiers transport her to a military base and place her in a cell with other victims. The occupants seem to be mostly relatives of affluent individuals and influential politicians. Inside the facility, they are each ordered to write down their personal information and contacts, which will later be used for blackmail. At midnight, the women are awakened and coerced into satisfying the soldiers' desires. On the contrary, Daniel is overwhelmed when asked to handle the administrative tasks for his wife and mother's funeral. Later, he approaches the prominent government official Victor and asks for his assistance in finding Marianne. Victor promptly agrees, and he introduces them to General Uribe, who will assist them in the same. In the next scene, the family mourns at the funeral of their deceased loved ones. The same day, Ivan is discharged from the hospital, but he still has to follow his medical treatments at home. A short time later, Victor pays him a visit and assures him that they will find his daughter as soon as possible. In the midst of all this, the rich people's reign and power begin to crumble as their servants are no longer subservient to their employers. Make your own damn salads. Back at the military base, the soldiers record videos of the victims being beaten up and send them to their families, demanding a large ransom for their release. At this point, the military appears to have complete control over the citizens, who are forced to comply with their demands. A nationwide curfew has been imposed, and those who disobey are shot to death. Elsewhere, Rolando becomes really concerned about his wife's deteriorating health, so he steps outside to ask the soldiers for permission to cross the border. Despite their initial warning, Rolando persists in his request, due to which he is shot and killed on the spot. Not long after, Alicia also dies. Because of her illness and lack of medical care, Christian, Marta, and other mourners gather at the church to offer their condolences. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Daniel receives a phone call from the military base demanding a ransom of $1 million in exchange for Marianne's release. Frightened by the threat, he and his dad go to Victor's office and show him the video footage to seek assistance. Upon hearing about Marianne's abduction, General Uribe promises to use all available information to track down the kidnappers. In the next scene, some of the kidnappers who took Marianne realize that their leader plans to pay them only 200,000 pesos, which they believe is insufficient. As a result, they decide to make their fortune in another way. They pay a secret visit to Christian's house and implore him to collect 800,000 pesos in exchange for Marianne's safe return. In order to show their authority and power, they provide Marta and Christian with 2 travel passes. The next day, the mother-son duo uses the travel passes and heads to their employer's mansion to deliver the unsettling news. Desperate and left with no other choice, Ivan agrees to pay 800,000 pesos, and Daniel hands over the money to them in the hope of getting Marianne back. Christine and Marta then return home with the money and hand it over to the kidnappers. Unfortunately, the greedy kidnappers demand another 1 million pesos, claiming that the initial payment was only a down payment. We really like green. Do you get it yet? At the military base, hostage number 3 is released after his family pays the ransom. However, as soon as he gets out of the cell, he is heartlessly shot to death. The remaining hostages are shaken by the sound of gunfire and scream in shock. It indicates that the military is not only demanding ransom money, but also taking the lives of the hostages, making it unlikely for any of them to be reunited with the families. The following day, Kristen and Marta explain the situation to Daniel, including how the kidnappers are demanding more money. This raises suspicion, so Daniel calls Victor right away, accusing the servants of being responsible for Marianne's kidnapping. With this information, General Uribe and his team go to Christian's house and wait for the kidnappers to arrive. As soon as they do, the police apprehend them.